Hi everyone, welcome to Homeschooling Through the Change. Today we'll be talking about the North Pole and the South Pole and our polar unit study resources. So I put together this unit over the summer when apparently I had way too much time on my hands. And I also realized I had so many resources and I had to figure out a way to organize all these different resources. I decided that this unit would be 3 weeks long, and so the first 2 weeks we would do the North Pole, and the third week we would do the South Pole. I also divided each week into categories. So day 1 would be some sort of science or mapping activity. Day 2 would be animals. Day 3 an explorer. And day 4 some kind of cultural study. So let's start with week 1, and that is the North Pole. We began the week with map work, and this is a map I found in an atlas that I already had, and I simply made up a little worksheet of things that my student needed to find and circle. The next day we did animals. So I was wondering when I was putting together this unit where I would find a book of polar animals, and I remembered that I had a bunch of National Geographic kids magazines from like 4 years that were sitting there gathering dust. So I went into these old magazines and I tore out all the pages that had to do with polar animals, and I put it together in these page protectors and bound it in a 5-star folder. So I really didn't have to buy a book about polar animals, which I was happy. I could just use what I already had on hand. And it turned out really beautifully. My 12-year-old would read an article about an animal from the National Geographic pages, and then I had made up these little animal card type things, and I had him pick one, cut it out, and paste it into his nature notebook, and then add 3 facts about that animal based on what he read. The first explorer that we looked at was Fridtjof Nansen. He never made it to the North Pole, but he has a famous boat named the Fram, and his story was really interesting about his attempt to reach the North Pole. This particular book, Locked in Ice, is written for younger readers. By younger, I mean middle school and high school. And it has pictures and a chapter book style, and easy to read and really good descriptions. I highly recommend this book. We also use this 100 Facts Polar Lands book. If you've seen other videos that I've done, I really love the 100 Facts series, and this one about polar lands is easy to use as a spine. We didn't use it as a spine for our unit, but we definitely looked at it a couple of times in the 3 weeks that we did this unit. This book has a lot of great pictures, short paragraphs, facts, and covers all kinds of things from the science of the polar regions to animals to the people who live there. We used Bear Grylls Survival Camp for our 4th day, and this book is really for elementary level, I would say, although there are good facts and cute illustrations in it if that anyone can learn from. We also had a magazine, which I don't have here, from Outdoor Living, and it was a special edition about surviving in extreme environments. And that book really was great for surviving in extreme cold and such. We don't usually do unit studies on Fridays, but I had so many resources, including this Planet Earth crosswords book, and I thought that would be a fun addition for Friday because there was a crossword that had to do with polar regions or cold weather or something like that. So I thought that fit right in with our unit. Moving on to week 2, The first day we did earth science, so we looked at all kinds of ice and icebergs, and we drew pictures of different types of ice in our nature notebook. For this, we used Ocean Anatomy by Julia Rothman, and we also used DK Oceans, a definitive visual guide. I did a flip through of this in a previous video, and I'll leave the link to that below. The next day we did animals, again from our National Geographic pages, and again we did cut and paste an animal into the nature notebook. And then the third day, we did an explorer, and the explorer for this week was Robert Peary. He is the one credited with being the first man to go to the North Pole. And he's really interesting because he traveled with Matthew Henson, who is a Black person and one of the first Black explorers. There are accounts of Robert Peary from the point of view of himself, from the point of view of Matthew Henson, from the point of view of Robert Peary's wife, as well as from the point of view of his daughter. So this book, Snow Baby, is from the point of view of Robert Peary's daughter, which I thought would be interesting to my kid, but he absolutely refused to read it. However, I thought it was good to mention it here. We also looked at a documentary on Amazon Prime, I think it was free for Prime members, about Robert Peary and the controversy surrounding him, and I think that was as good as any book anyway, so I'm pretty happy with our coverage of him. The next day we did the Northern Lights. We looked at all the pictures in this book. The photographer took all these pictures from Alaska. I kind of thought that the book had pictures from all over the world, but actually these are pictures taken from Alaska, but that does not diminish the awesomeness of the pictures and the Northern Lights and the many colors that they can come in. I didn't even know that you could have kind of orangey Northern Lights, and it's just really cool to look at. In the evenings, we would have read-alouds, and so one of them was the Siberian Folktales book, but I would say it's much more geared for elementary level, and though the stories were cute, I wouldn't recommend it for a middle schooler or a high schooler. We also read How Things Came to Be, Inuit Stories of Creation. This book was fabulous. It is so different from Greek, Roman, Egyptian, and Norse mythology. I mean, it is really different, and I love the emphasis on how the land responded to the extreme emotions of the people way, way, way back in time. These creation stories really feel so old, maybe even older than the Norse stories. So I highly recommend this book. For week 3, we were on to the South Pole, but we were starting to get a little bit distracted. There were other things going on in our lives, and so it was really hard to concentrate on week 3, but we got through it. So we started with map work again of Antarctica, and that is a map photocopied from the same Oxford Atlas. I made up a worksheet of things to find and circle. I also had a map that I photocopied from another reproducible map book that I had. The next day we did the South Pole animals, and I had put together a separate folder for South Pole animals from our National Geographic pages. And my 12-year-old read an article, cut out pictures, and added some facts about what he read. I also found this book called Every Penguin in the World, and it's about this photographer who decides that he has to go and see every species of penguin in their natural habitat. So he and his wife goes around exploring, and he takes the most amazing photographs of these penguins, and he also includes his story and some of the hardships that he faced in going to all of these strange places, including Antarctica. I think it was well worth reading. We actually just looked at the pictures, but I intend to read it myself at some date in the future. For our Explorer this week, we had more than one, and so we couldn't read a chapter book for each one. That would take way more than a week. So I had this book called Amazing Expeditions, and had my kid read the short entry about Roald Amundsen, who was the first person to the South Pole. Right after Amundsen's entry in this book was also Ernest Shackleton, so I had my kid read that as well. But we also had a book about Ernest Shackleton separately, and this is a big, thick book, and I did not expect him to read it, but we did look at some of the pictures, which were stunning. As it seems, all polar photographs are just really gorgeous. Now, Ernest Shackleton never reached the South Pole, but for some reason you can't talk about the South Pole without talking about him. And so that was great that we had a short summary that we could read about him and kind of get the gist of what his story was. This was the chapter book that I had for this week, which was Lost in the Antarctic. It was about Ernest Shackleton, and it's a book written for young readers, a chapter book. It's got some pictures in it and lots of good information. But as I said, we were getting distracted by week 3, and by this time we were a little bit polared out. So my kid did not read this book, but I think it would have been a good read anyway. The last person that we explored was my partner, Reed Stowe. He wasn't exactly an explorer, maybe more of an adventurer, but he did an expedition to Antarctica in 1986-87, and we looked at pictures from the family album showing his boat in Antarctica and him and his crew in Antarctica, along with penguins and other creatures. That boat has done many amazing things since the Antarctic expedition, and we are getting it ready to do another adventure in the near future, but that will be covered more in my other YouTube channel, Beyond the Thousand Days. The last day of our polar unit, we worked in our timeline book. This is a book that I got from Bookshark, and it's just a book with a line in it and dates on each page. The timeline figures I made myself. Again, I had too much time on my hands. I just got stock photos and added a little caption to them and printed this out on sticker paper, and then we cut it out and we stuck the various figures in their timeline in the timeline book. So that was our polar unit for 3 weeks, North Pole and South Pole for middle school. And I hope you got some inspiration, and links will be in the description box below for all the resources that I talked about in this video. And I hope I'll see you in another video. Bye!